Today is an exciting day, and that's because within the last day or so, the Distant Horizons mod has been updated to officially support shaders using Iris. I covered this combination about 3 months ago while it was in early access, and there was obviously a ton of excitement considering just how amazing it is. Now, it's easily accessible, and because it's officially released, I expect shader support for this mod will grow pretty quickly. In fact, since I made the last video, a multitude of shaders have already added support. So this time around, I'm going to be showing you some shaders that have compatibility with this mod, and some settings you can enable in order to get the absolute best out of them, and some other mods that, again, just showcase this mod at its maximum potential. So for starters, obviously you're going to need the Distant Horizons mod, and then if you're playing with Fabric, you're going to need a combination of Iris, Sodium, and Indium, and if you're playing on Forge, you're going to need Embeddium and Oculus. And once you've installed the required mods, just load up a world and the chunks will begin rendering. And this part may take a decent amount of time and will only take longer the higher you set the render distance, but you can speed it up a bit if you change the CPU load to a higher level, although I would recommend bringing it back down after you've generated the chunks. Cause I'll tell you, if you have this setting on, say, aggressive or I paid for the whole CPU, your computer's gonna sound like it's trying to take off. And you can further speed up this process, and in general just chunk loading, by installing a few mods like C2ME and Noisium, so I would recommend you have those as well. So after you've let the chunks load, you should have a notably higher render distance, and at this point, it's time to add some shaders. And the first shader I'll be showing you all is Bliss, and this is the shader that pretty much everyone was using when they were making videos for this mod, because it just looks absolutely amazing. It already looks really good on its own, and when you mix it with Distant Horizons, Minecraft's visuals have been pretty drastically changed. And this all looks fantastic with vanilla world generation, but there's a few mods out there that takes this to yet another level. The first of these, which is the mod I mainly covered in the last video, is Tectonic. This mod introduces far more realistic terrain to Minecraft, which is just much more capable of showing off these render distances. And Tectonic can also be combined with Terralith, so you get those beautiful biomes with the amazing terrain generation, and this is just a winning combo. I mean, both of these mods are amazing on their own, so when together, they're pretty exceptional. And the second terrain generation option, which is very, very good, is Lithosphere. Like Tectonic, this mod also adds realistic terrain generation to the game, and while they're both aiming for a fairly similar result, they absolutely can be distinguished from one another and have some pretty unique features. For example, in the Tectonic mod, rivers that run into mountains will just simply tunnel through them, creating these really impressive subterranean rivers. On the other hand, rivers in Lithosphere won't run into mountains, they're gonna actually be in valleys and behave more like a river you'd see in real life. And you really can't go wrong with either of these mods, you're gonna be impressed regardless. But anyway, focusing on Bliss shaders again, in my opinion, where it's truly at its best is during sunsets and sunrises, as the distant fog in Bliss just looks so good, and so do the shadows. And when the sun is low on the horizon, illuminating all of that, it just looks absolutely phenomenal. And another feature that comes enabled by default in Bliss shaders is cloud shadows. And I'd say this option is pretty important when it comes to making the distant terrain just look more believable. For example, here's a comparison showing the world with cloud shadows on versus having them off. And in my personal opinion, this difference is pretty significant. It still looks solid when they're not on, but it just doesn't reach the same level of visual quality when they're enabled. And this difference is big enough that I searched within the other shaders options for the cloud shadow setting, and the good news is all of them have it, which I'll be showing you soon enough. But before we move on from Bliss shaders, I'm going to quickly show you a couple of their settings you can change, which gives you a really cool result. First, within the fog settings, you're going to need to enable render clouds as fog, as this is going to make it so clouds are actually visible when you're above them, otherwise they just turn invisible. And second, within cloud settings, I lowered small cumulus clouds height from 300 down to say like 120. You're also going to want to raise the cloud coverage a little bit, and once you've completed all these steps, you're going to notice that clouds are going to be much lower, obviously since you've lowered their height, but you'll also have the ability to actually move through them. And these settings are going to make the terrain, especially in mountainous terrain, just look absolutely remarkable. And flying through the clouds with an elytra is just something you're gonna have to try. But anyway, moving on from Bliss shaders, we're now going to be taking a look at Photon. And like Bliss, Photon has a more realism-focused appearance. Compared to Bliss, I found distant terrain to be a fair bit clearer. There are some settings we're going to want to enable or change though. For starters, I found that Photon's clouds seem to move in a very unusual way, really, whenever you move. And obviously this could get very distracting, but luckily, if you head into the shader's cloud settings and set temporal upscaling to off, the issue just seems to disappear. I also decided clouds were simply too low by default, and the easiest solution to this is setting the scale option much lower. I'd say both of these settings are pretty important, especially fixing the cloud jiggling, and at this point, Photon is going toe-to-toe with Bliss, perhaps even taking the lead. And one other setting I found that's pretty useful is enabling TAA upscaling. It yields a solid FPS boost, and honestly, I can't really tell a difference visually. This could potentially be due to the fact I'm playing at 4K, but it's certainly worth checking out if you need or want a higher frame rate. Moving on, the next shader with Distant Horizons compatibility I'll be showing you is BSL, and this is one of the most popular Minecraft shaders available, so seeing it gain compatibility is obviously very exciting. Once again though, there are a couple settings I'd say are definitely worth making adjustments to, the first of which again is cloud height, which you should set to very high. The clouds can still be raised a little bit more as well by setting a volumetric scale to original skybox, and plus, as I mentioned before, the shader also has a cloud shadow setting, which we will absolutely take advantage of. I also lowered the fog density to around 0.37 in order to get an overall clearer image. Like many of the settings I've covered in this video, this will come down to preference. And finally, within anti-aliasing settings, I decided to enable TAA. Again, I feel this enhances the overall quality of the visuals enough to warrant mentioning this feature. It's probably not all that noticeable when watching the video, but when you're actually playing, there's a decent chance you'll be able to tell the difference. And overall, BSL deviates from the style that Bliss and Photon have pretty significantly. It isn't really going for the realistic visuals, it's more so on the stylized side. Yet, despite the fact it looks so different, it's still absolutely fantastic in its own right. Now, the last shader I'll be showing you all today with Distant Horizons is Complementary. Again, this is one of the most popular shaders available, and this time around, there's really only a few things I feel are necessary to change. Nothing too drastic. Like the other shaders, I simply raised the height of clouds to something much more substantial and enabled cloud shadows. At this point, combined with Distant Horizons, Complementary is starting to look like a trailer. I mean, just throw in the bare bones resource pack and it's getting pretty close. Complementary may provide the cleanest visuals of all the shaders I've shown on this list. It's a tough call though, they all look pretty amazing. Overall, I really don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that Distant Horizons combined with shaders and a solid world generation mod is the best Minecraft has ever looked. Every time you reach the top of a mountain, you're greeted with a new spectacular view. And like I said, I think this is just going to continue to get even better as more shaders begin to support Distant Horizons. So let me know what you think about this in the comments and what shader you believe works best with the mod. And if you'd like to give this a try, you can find all the links in the description. And anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And until next time, thanks for watching.